In December of 2010, I was doing a speaking tour of the Middle East, and I had a day off in Qatar. And I decided that I wanted to go dune blasting because the brochure in the hotel said that your guide will drive you over 100-foot sand cliffs at 70 miles an hour. But my favorite part of the brochure was that it said, and then he will help keep you alive overnight in the desert. And I said, that sounds confident enough for me, let's do that. So I wander out at 7 o'clock in the morning, and I meet my guide, and it's this man right here. Now, this is the only time throughout the entire course of the day that he was not smiling, because he said that the ladies like it when you look intense in photographs. And as I walk towards this guy, he jumps out of the car and he throws his hands and he goes, Mr. Dudley, welcome to Mustafa's grand adventure. I am Mustafa. And I wanted to match his energy, so I idiotically went with this. Mustafa, like the Lion King. And he, like, deadpan looks at me and goes, that's Mufasa. I said, apparently he's not going to try that hard to keep me alive in the desert, right? But then he gets this big grin, he's like, I'm kidding, hop in. And this guy starts to talk. And he starts to talk about what we're gonna learn from the desert. He starts to talk about all he knows about Canada. This man is just pouring energy out. And this is 7 o'clock in the morning. And this is 1 hour nonstop. And we're an hour outside the city, and finally I just go, Mustafa, man, where do you get your energy? You are the most upbeat dude that I have ever been with. And he looks at me and he goes with this huge smile and says, well, it's my first day. Now, I'm well aware that everyone has to start somewhere. But when there are 100-foot cliffs involved, I would rather not be in the car with the newbie, right? And I guess I look terrified. And he goes, don't worry, it's always my first day. And I said, what do you mean? He goes, well, think about it. On your first day, you dress your best. You show up early. You really, really try to impress your boss. You're incredibly nice to your coworkers. You are never more committed to your job than you are on your first day. As a matter of fact, you are never more convinced that this is going to be the greatest job that you have ever had than you are on your first day. As soon as your second day starts, all of that starts to stop being quite so true. He said, 13 years ago, I started this job, and I loved it, and I knew I was going to love it. And so I decided 13 years ago that I would never have a second day of work. So it has been my first day for 13 years. And I was so inspired by that way of looking at life and work. But what was really weird is that just as quickly I kind of got depressed, because this was right after I had quit my job, and I had loved my job. But there had been this really intense interpersonal conflict that had gone on for quite a while and finally made me feel like I had to go. And when I heard him talk about how much he loved his job, I couldn't help but start to think about everything that I felt like I'd been pushed away from in mine, everything that I'd helped to build and that I'd had to say goodbye to, and everything that seemed to be like torn apart. And I started to think about the person that I held responsible for it. And I got really quiet. And he thought that he'd insulted me. And he said, Drew, I'm so sorry, did I say something wrong? And I said, no, Mustafa. And then I basically tell this complete stranger an incredibly personal story of my life's conflict. And he gets really quiet. And finally he says, Drew, this person that you're talking about, they are so far away. They are so far away that it is night where they are, and it is day where you are. But you're letting them make it night where you are. You are letting them wreck Mustafa's grand adventure. And they're not even here. And what's worse, you're acting like it's their fault. I kind of got annoyed. I was like, well, it is their fault. I just told you the story. And he goes, no, with respect, Drew, it's your fault because you're letting them live rent-free in your head. He says, think about it. Think about a landlord. A landlord will allow people to use their property, but they charge rent to make sure they get something valuable in return to protect their investment. He said, your head and your heart are the most valuable pieces of property that you own. And if you're going to let people use them, you would better make sure that you get something valuable in return. All that this person brings you is anger and bitterness and sadness, and none of those things are valuable to you. But when you accept anger and bitterness and sadness in return for access to your head and your heart, you are basically letting someone live there rent-free. And he said, Drew, the landlord sets the rent. All right? You're the landlord. You're not allowed to be angry when all you get paid is what you asked for. And this guy was dropping knowledge like that on me for 18 hours straight. It was like going, honestly, it was like going dune blasting with Yoda. But we've talked a lot about the power of human connection today, but when I think about what Mustafa said, what I'm reminded of is that not everything to which we are connected brings us value. And unfortunately, some of the most powerful connections that we allow ourselves to forge can actually be among our most limiting. And I was the producer of a musical project once, and one of the songs that was submitted had this set of lyrics that I've always remembered. And they said, there's a difference between grounded and run into the ground. Some things keep you rooted, and some just weigh you down. And you have to decide what you'd rather keep around. And I think that the ability to take a look at the connections in our lives and honestly ask ourselves which of these things are keeping us rooted and which of these things are weighing us down, that's an incredibly valuable skill to have in order to get the most out of a life that's going to knock us around sometimes. Because there are things that live rent-free in our heads, and it's not always people. It's also failures, it's also losses, and it's also these ideas that somewhere along the way we pick them up and they start to limit us. And there's one particular idea that's been living rent-free in way too many young people's heads, and it's kind of become my passion to go after it. And for me, it started when I was working with a group of university students in a workshop, and I asked what I thought was a completely innocuous question. And I'm going to ask it to some unfortunate person in the front row here as well. You have won. Congratulations. Are you ready? You look so excited right now. So let me ask you the question I asked that day. Why do you matter? And that look of absolute terror is exactly what happened. And I said, okay. And then I asked somebody else in the crowd, why do you matter? And I got that same look of confusion and sort of fear. And I started to ask that question. And I've asked it to hundreds of university and college students all around the world, and watching them struggle to answer it has made me realize that there is an idea that is living rent-free in your head, and that is that you are somehow training to matter right now. And that one day when you get good enough marks from good enough schools, and you make enough money from prestigious enough jobs, then all of a sudden, then you will be ready to matter. And everything that we're doing in the meantime is some sort of training session. And I think we have got to evict this idea that the biggest impact you're going to have on the world is going to come down the pipe later on. We've got to evict this idea that this is some sort of training to matter. You matter right now. And we've also got to ask ourselves, can we really call it an education when the best, the brightest, the smartest, and the most well-educated young people in our countries freak out because no one's ever asked them, why do you matter before? Because you do. When I was 19 years old, my parents let me throw the end of high school party, like the one that's been in every teen comedy movie ever. And partway through the party, I was leaning back against the cottage. And I saw two of my friends who were a couple, and they were all snuggled up watching the sun go down. And I snapped a photograph of it, and then I leaned back against the cottage and got all bitter. And I turned to my buddy Scott, who was sitting next to me, and I said, Scott, you know, it sucks that I don't have somebody like that. You know, it really sucks. I'm so tired of always being alone. And Scotty, who is that friend who's the athlete and musician, the perfect balance of left brain, right brain we've all got, Scotty looks at me and goes, Drew, for a guy who's got everything going for him, all I ever hear from you is about what you don't have. And I was not yet at that point in my life where I want friends who tell me what I need to hear as opposed to what I want to hear. So I pushed back. And I said, I don't have everything going for me. You know, all I have is pressure. All I have is people telling me, make sure you keep getting those amazing marks and make sure that you live up to your potential. All I feel like I have is an opportunity to disappoint everyone. All I feel is like I have an opportunity to be a failure in front of everybody who believes in me. And Scott looked at me for what seemed like a really long time. And then he said, Drew, you have got to give your friends more credit. He says, we don't care about you because of the guy that you might be one day. We care about you because of the guy that you are now. I think you have to start doing the same thing. And that is a piece of advice that has stuck with me for my entire life. Never diminish the person that you are in the name of this person that you think you're going to become one day. And you know what? Give your friends more credit because they're going to forgive you. And the really true friends I've discovered as you get older, the true friends in your life, they're the ones who judge you based on the person they know you are on an average Tuesday afternoon, not the person we are sometimes on our worst Saturday nights. But unfortunately, only a few weeks after Scott gave me that advice, he and my other friend Tim were actually killed in a car accident just outside of my hometown. And Scotty was 18 years old, and that was 16 years ago. And I'm talking about what he taught me on a stage at a TED event 16 years later, because he mattered. And so do you guys. And after I said goodbye to Scott, I went off to university, and I met this amazing guy, not to be stereotypical Canadian, but there he is in the hockey uniform. And his name was Jason Abraham. And Jason was one of the senior staff members at the bar that I ended up working at. And everybody loved this guy. And he was one of the coolest guys on campus, and I had wanted to be cool since I was old enough to know that I wasn't. So like 4. And so one night after work, I said to Jason, man, like, how do you connect so easily to people? Like, how is it that people seem so drawn to you? And he said, you know what? I just try to keep it simple. I think that your life is better the fewer times you put yourself in a position where you might feel forced to say, I'm sorry. And if you want to pull unnecessary I'm sorries out of your life, the easiest way to do it is this. Every time you talk about somebody, act as if they are standing directly behind you. Your life just gets easier. Every time you talk about somebody, act as if they're standing directly behind you is maybe the best life advice I have ever been given that I find a way to ignore on an almost daily basis. But that's how this guy talked, and that's how this guy lived. And unfortunately, just a few weeks after he gave me that advice, Jason was diagnosed with abdominal cancer. And within 5 weeks, he was gone. And Jason Abraham was 23 years old. And I stand on stages all over the world, and I talk about what he taught me because he mattered. I'm 36 years old, and I have been to 6 of my friends' weddings, and I've been to 15 of their funerals. And I could do a full talk on what every single one of those individuals taught me and that has made my life better. And not one of them lived to see their 24th birthday, but they mattered. And I think that we have to evict this idea from our minds that impact and the ability to make an impact is in any way, shape, or form related to how old you are, or how well you do in school, or how much money that you're going to make. Because honestly, your ability to turn out and matter to someone and have them talk about what you taught them is absolutely immeasurable. And I love talking about the lessons that my friends taught me because that's how I let go of their loss. And I talk about them in a lot of different places. About 2 years ago, I was talking about Scotty, I was talking about Jason, and at the end of the presentation, this young woman walked up to me. And she said, Drew, I really liked your presentation, but I feel bad for all the pain that you've had in your life. And then she told me her story. And it was filled with so much more courage and so many more challenges and so much more pain and loss than mine was that I looked at her and I said, how in the world can you tell me that you feel bad for the pain I've had in my life when yours so obviously dwarfs mine? And she looked at me and she said, Drew, I've discovered that there is no universal measuring unit for pain. Hurt just hurts. So comparing it is pointless. But I have discovered that only hurt people hurt others. And so if I want to be the type of person I want to be, I've got to let go of the things that hurt me so that I don't end up hurting the people I care about. Only hurt people hurt others. Honestly, that is one of those things that you know that it's true when you hear it, but the more that I've lived with it in my life, the more powerful it has become. Because what it has come to me is that leaders have to heal. We have got to let go and disconnect from the things that have hurt us. Otherwise, we will carry those things around with us, and one day we will use them as a weapon against the people that we care about the most. The fact is that leaders have to forgive. The problem is, I think, that we want to win. Like, we carry around these conflicts with us, and we know they're sucking value out of our lives, but we want to win. We don't want anybody out there thinking that they beat us, anybody thinking they got one over on us. We know that we should let them go, but we're not willing to do so until somebody acknowledges that we were right and that we won. And I want to let you know, the most extraordinary people that I've worked with in my life, they could not care less about winning. What they care about is succeeding. And sometimes the only true way to get into success is to let go of this idea that we have to win. I have lost way too many friends in ways that I cannot control to not tell every audience who will listen that if you can save a relationship, personal, family, romantic, by simply saying I'm sorry or hearing I'm sorry, please do it. Because there is absolutely no worse feeling in the world than going to the funeral of somebody that you cared about desperately and the last thing you said to them was terrible. And I think leadership means going to bed every single night and knowing that that can't possibly be true. But I know that almost everybody in this room has somebody that you wish was still in your life, and the only reason that they're not, that you can't text them or call them or share things with them, is because you either will not say I'm sorry or hear I'm sorry. Guys, do it. There is no weakness in forgiveness, and I honestly believe that sometimes leadership begins where forgiveness begins. But I know that it's not just that easy. Like, I recognize that you can't just forgive and snap your fingers. I mean, I don't do it. I know that I'm still carrying things with me. And I don't expect us all to be able to walk out here today and immediately forgive everyone who's ever hurt us or let go of everything that's ever made us feel like less than we are. But what I do think we have to do is we have to be willing to ask the question every day honestly, what is living rent-free in my head? And am I ready to let it go? Because the answer might not be yes today, and it might not be yes tomorrow, and it may not be yes for a long, long time. But I honestly believe that any question that is asked every day is going to get answered sooner than one that is only asked once a week, or once a month, or once a year, or we never ask at all because we're afraid of the answer. Because honestly, guys, I think that leadership isn't knowing all the answers. Leadership is being willing to keep asking the unanswered questions in our lives over and over again until we're ready to hear the answer. Because there are things living rent-free in our lives. But guess what? We're the landlord. The landlord sets the rent. And I think when it comes to our head and our heart, that it's time to jack up the prices a little bit. Guys, thank you so very much for letting me share that with you today, all right? Peace. Thank you very much. Thanks.